Thanks, Marissa. I'm pleased to welcome Brie Bastidas from Mapbox. Brie will be talking to us about strategically engaging passive talent. Definitely top of mind for a lot of folks these days, and we're really looking forward to hear her talk. So with that, Brie, thanks again for being here today. Over to you.
Thank you. I'm super glad to be here today. This is a really interesting topic and one that we've been thinking a lot about over the last 7 to 8 months. A little about me before we get started. I'm a full lifecycle recruiter and talent leader, and I've been in the tech industry for about 7 years, from seed stages all the way through to IPO. Some of the things that I'm passionate about are outbound conversion, process creation, data, and mentoring. And just a little fun fact about me, since the pandemic, I've read over 60 books, and I've also been observing the original social distancing, which is backpacking, with my dog Jax. I've been focusing on this topic in my day-to-day and professional life, testing and measuring these results all year. I'm really, really excited to share my best tips and tricks. You all know this, you've been living through it. COVID-19 hit and a lot of people got laid off or furloughed. Even those who found new employment or never experienced employment gaps are even less likely to make changes this year. They're more likely to want to stay in their current roles, even though they may not be as content as they know they can be, simply because they feel like it's less risky. As sourcers and recruiters, the messaging tactics we used in 2019 no longer succeed at the same rates. The conversion flows are different, and now we have to find creative ways to engage these potential candidates and their concerns before we even talk to them about a role. Company stability is paramount to candidates in 2020 and beyond, because company stability equals job security. Candidates are seemingly more risk adverse and more commonly asking questions like, how likely is it that the role we've sourced them for will be impacted long term? How has the pandemic impacted your business performance? Has there been any imminent restructuring of teams, or will there be? And sometimes even, what do severance packages look like? Prospective candidates are asking real questions about company values, like diversity and inclusion, earlier and earlier in the process, often as early as initial phone screens. They want to make sure that their values align with your company's values and vision before getting too far. At Mapbox, we talk about collective IQ, which is a diversity of perspectives that broaden our ability to tackle tough problems. We personally love unconventional backgrounds because having these different vantage points on the same problem allows us to build the technology as best as possible. Candidates are also weighing benefits differently than they had before. A lot of companies are having to rethink their employee value propositions. These benefits concerns entail employee well-being, as well as non-traditional forms of wellness like mindfulness or financial well-being. This can sometimes be teletherapy stipends like Headspace, or clear guidelines for flexible work hours for parents, work from home stipends, as well as wellness days that the entire team observes for self-care. These are the kind of things that talent is looking for right now, and it's important that you lead on how your company is addressing it. We use a tactic that I call first and foremost, which addresses any major concerns within the first portion of your initial conversation to ease the candidates and also act proactively. Ask questions like, or answer questions like, why would your work environment be unique? What are so great about its values? How is your company supporting its employees during this pandemic? What does your company stability look like? Maybe you have donation matching for valued causes, and so on. Today, I'm going to share 4 steps for building a strategy to engage passive talent in 2020 and beyond. We have talent personas, diversity strategy, thoughtful outreach in the time of COVID, and then nurturing candidates. As we go through these slides, my hope is that you at least take one thing away with you. The first step is selecting the personas of talent. Passive talent comes in many forms, and there are many different talent pools you can choose from, many whom you may have already have in your ATS or sourcing platforms like GEM. A few groups you might reach out to are silver medalists, referrals, network sourcing, talent communities, or even warm leads. First, we'll cover silver medalists. Maybe your hiring team chose a different candidate for a role, but really liked multiple candidates and wanted to keep them in mind for future opportunities. Maybe the timing was off and the candidate would have been great to revisit a year down the road. It's important to track this. You can create a specific tag or rejection reason to later leverage when you're sourcing your database or ATS. Some tags could be PFH, which is promising future hire, or re-engage, or even silver medalists. You can also set up reminders in your ATS or GEM to circle back within 3 to 6 months down the road with specific mentions on background or what role you had specifically wanted to reach out to them about. I always recommend leaving detailed notes beyond just a generic, not a right fit or lacking skills, so that way your colleagues know the context if there's any kind of hand change. As recruiters, we move really fast, and I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have every conversation or detail documented. Then you have referrals, which are always awesome, but how do you take it a couple of steps beyond just asking or waiting for referrals? Talk about communities that your teams may be engaged with. This could be LinkedIn groups, meetups, Slack channels, ERGs. There could also be hackathons, competitions, or speaking engagements, especially if you're looking for a candidate with specific accolades. There's also what I've dubbed network sourcing. The goal is to cast a wide net on social platforms to gain awareness for as many viewers as possible. You create a rotational plan for your interview panel to share the news about a team. Maybe it's a blog that showcases their recent work, or a shout out that also mentions that they're hiring on social. There's an example here from a post from one of our female engineers. Make also sure that you add your hashtag. So hashtag hiring or hashtag engineering hiring. Then you have talent communities. Hopefully you already have the infrastructure for talent communities like GEM, but if not, it's a great time to build that out. GEM communities are something we realized we could have been taking advantage of sooner, and it's not just related to the pandemic, but the situation that we're now in is bringing this to the forefront of our minds. You can set up project communities of high quality candidates for categories like principal level engineers or engineering leadership, or your domain experts, to be able to re-engage and cultivate over time with regular check-ins with those individuals. Ours is a communal team project we set up in GEM. So as soon as you have a role open, you already have an active pipeline of high caliber talent at your disposal. If hiring was paused at your company and you want to re-engage, it takes a different kind of messaging. Be genuine and transparent when you check in with those individuals. And in some cases, you've already built a relationship with them and you want that to show. Especially if your hiring pause was unexpected and you have active candidates in process, give them updates as often as you can. Your ATS is also a gold mine of warm leads. You can use Boolean search to source it. Think about how many candidates have been added into your ATS or have applied. It's a really great place to start. You can also leverage your candidate pools by revisiting GEM sequences or asking a colleague about similar roles they had open last month or last quarter. It's awesome to be able to network and work with your other colleagues on sharing your pipeline. There's also the follow-up later candidates that you can label in GEM. They may not have been looking at the point that you reached out to them, but it's definitely worth staying in touch. So go back through all of your sequences and revisit. The second step for strategically engaging passive talent in 2020 is to consider your diversity strategy. This is not the primary topic for this presentation, and there's enough to be said to fill an entire discussion. I'll just be touching the surface, as I know there are other presentations today that will go more in detail on this subject, but I still think it's really important to address. Diversity is critical for everyone. It's worth pausing on diversity here because it speaks to values alignment. Candidates care about this more than ever, so as you're building out your talent pool, you can't overlook it, especially if your talent pool has been predominantly representative of majority categories. In 2020, diverse teams have become more of a priority in efforts to balance organizations to have representation of diverse perspectives and experiences. Organizations are tracking and reporting on the diversity of their teams. Candidates are paying attention to your transparency or whether or not they identify with your company values based on how they identify themselves. So sourcing and recruiting teams are being pushed to be more unique and more strategic in not only their outreach, but improving their recruiting best practices. So what can you do? Given that diversity is so top of mind for everyone right now, I imagine that you've all begun to diversify your sourcing strategies to tap into different talent communities. Some strategies that have worked for us include partnering with your ERGs for referrals or other resources or platforms, searching hashtags or mentions on social media, following influencer blogs and tracking individual engagement like Michelle Kim, who's the CEO of Awaken, or Una King, who's the head of D&I at Snap, or Aubrey Blanche, who runs D&I at Atlassian. There's also some platforms like seekout.io that we recently started using. There's Hive Learning, as well as a equality section on Medium. There are plenty of virtual events happening, and you can plan your own as well. We have something at Mapbox called Mappy Hour, which covers different pieces of technology that Mapbox uses with a wide variety of customers, as well as sometimes candidates. You can also leverage and engage your teams to write blogs on their experiences. What you want to make sure that you do is that your outreach aligns with your broader company perspective. You want to make sure your outreach feels authentic and your values of inclusion shine through. This is worth saying for all outreach, but it's particularly important when you're considering your diversity initiatives. If the messaging of your email outreach doesn't sound or look like messaging anywhere else on your company's website or on its social feeds, or even in your job descriptions, your outreach simply won't ring true. The third step is engaging passive talent is being thoughtful about your outreach to prospective candidates. I'll share a few tips with you on how to be thoughtful in your outreach. What's so great about SOBO, or Send on Behalf of, is that it allows you to be much more high touch with your outreach. With GEM, you can even send on behalf of with multiple different teammates in the same sequence. So maybe one stage comes from me, but stage 2 comes from a hiring manager, or stage 3 comes from a director of engineering. Now I've created this super high touch engagement strategy that looks like it's coming from multiple people. And it's not only seen some really impressive results, but our leaders and candidates absolutely love it. Although messaging was near identical aside from the introduction line of our roles, our engineering managers had over a 20% higher engagement rate than our technical recruiters. As a point of comparison, market standards for sourcing pipelines are typically 60% open, 22% reply, 12% interested, and then 9% converted. Our SOBOs roughly translated to about 88 to 91% open rate, 43% or higher reply rate, resulting in anywhere between an 18 to 20% conversion rate. There's also comedic relief. Some tips would be to keep it light. We've all experienced the heaviness that has come from this year. Not only are we feeling the turmoil, but in many instances, your candidates are working harder or longer in order to keep their companies afloat. Comedic relief can be key in engaging with your prospective candidates. It opens the door to a conversation, or at minimum will brighten their day, even just a little. The second piece of advice is to know your audience. Although comedic relief can be helpful as a tool, you need to pay attention to your audience and know how and when to use tactics like this. Bounce off ideas off your colleagues, iron out any kinks. Some of the tactics I use for ICs are very different than the tactics that I use for senior leadership. Here are some examples that are here on this slide around important things that I've learned in quarantine, which mentions that I'm personally very terrible at baking bread, and I actually have no idea how to TikTok, which gets a lot of laughs, but there are also some nice little one-liners that are thoughtful yet engaging to a lot of these candidates. And this is some proof that it's proven to work. Here's a handful of responses from candidates, and I'll give you a few minutes to read through them. And moving to the next slide. When you find great talent, you want to be able to nurture the relationship regardless of timing. This year, everyone is experiencing the world in very different ways. Between the BLM movement to natural disasters to the election and the economy, it's important to allow for opportunity of passive candidates to be in a low pressure situation or casual conversation that they can comfortably explore without the pressure of being sold. It's also more important than ever to personalize the conversation. Take a few minutes to write a few words as to why you're reaching out. When you're looking at a candidate's profile on LinkedIn, come up with 3 key reasons as to why that profile is exciting or why it caught your attention. Something like, I came across your background and was very impressed with your scaled leadership experience, passion for solving complex problems, as well as your mentorship philosophies. I'd love the opportunity to learn more about what motivates you and where you're going in your career. You can also leave the door open, which could reduce the pressure or stress and the candidate feeling like they're being sold or that they need to respond. Some ways in which I do this are at the end of my messaging, I say, either way, it'd be great to connect with you, even if casually to explore, no pressure. In some ways, the core purpose of a first email hasn't changed. I'm still addressing a skeptical reader, trying to quickly convey as much information as possible as I can about the nature of the role, as well as the health of the business, so they can decide whether it's worth their time to learn more. But again, you may want to lead with a different strategy. You may need to go into real detail about your company financials, especially how you're strategically navigating the macroeconomic climate that shows how you're being exceptional. You may need to point to month-over-month growth, the size of the org, its growth opportunity, ARR, valuation, market size, marquee customers, industry coverage. I call this the highlight section, and I typically include it at the bottom of my emails. How you paint the picture depends entirely on available facts about your company. The key is being as straightforward as possible and providing all of the details up front. The last step I want to discuss with you is nurturing talent. Nurture is always important, but if your company is not hiring or planning to hire soon, this is where you'll want to focus most of your efforts. Follow up with candidates and craft updates. You can connect with them routinely about company news. Did you have new funding rounds or new influential hires or awards or accolades, press releases, or maybe even new product updates? You can update them on blogs and repurpose what your marketing team is putting out there, whether it's product, culture, or customer best practices related. Whether you have something, we do have something called a Lunchbox live stream every other Thursday at Mapbox, which we discuss rotational topics with customers as well as invite candidates, giving them an inside view into the inner workings of our technology and its use cases. It could also be marketing assets. Candidates could be interested in case studies or solution briefs, white papers, and so on. They want to hear about how you're positioning yourself as an industry leader and what your product is offering for customers. Mapbox recently did a series of projects surrounding disenfranchised voters, mapping racial disparities, and COVID data visualizations for the CDC. Beyond nurturing talent with company content, you'll want to share content that helps them see what it's like to work at your company. Show them how great it is. This may mean sharing blog posts written by individual employees, photos or videos of your team in action, your diversity statistics, links to your social platforms, interviews with executives, and so on. Give talent a glimpse into the day-to-day life. Why do people love working for you? You can also add employee testimonials. You can embed these directly in your email or hyperlink them. It could also be a spotlight video or a photo. Talent wants to hear directly from the mouths of your employees. How does your sales team celebrate wins? What keeps your recruiter happily coming back to work every day when hiring is on pause? Also, don't forget to remind talent to follow you on social or embed it in your signature so they can stay tuned with the latest on your company. Here's a quick recap. We went over talent personas, which included silver medalists, referrals, network sourcing, talent communities, and warm leads. We covered diversity, where you partner with your ERGs, follow influencers, attend virtual events, or source hashtags. We covered thoughtful outreach, which you can do send on behalf of, comedic relief, intermittent check-ins, and personalization. And lastly, nurturing your candidates, which is email updates or newsletters with company news, new blog posts, or marketing materials. Those are all my best tips and tricks. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brie. Those are definitely some great tips. We have a lot of questions for you. I'd like to start with this first one. How often or what percent of your hires would you say come from sourcing passive talent versus direct applications or referrals?
Great question. For the entire organization, which is business and engineering, it's roughly about 30%. And then for engineering, it's about 42%. Direct applications are somewhere around 20% for the whole org, 18% for engineering. And for referrals, it's about 19% whole org and then 23% for engineering.
Oh, wow. Also, this question coming about talent communities. Can you explain more so about what a talent community is and how it works and what you need to do to set that up?
Yeah. So setting it up is fairly easy. You can do it in GEM, create a project, share it with your colleagues. But what it allows you to do is work more efficiently and keep track of high caliber talent. For us, what we realized is because of the nature of Mapbox technology is very complex, and what we build is for other developers. as well as the fact that it has a very complicated domain, we were losing track of a lot of really great candidates that may have been too junior at the time for a specific role or needs changed, but we wanted to keep track of them. So we started building these projects in order to toss candidates over the fence to one another, or as we open new roles, to be able to have an already active pipeline of candidates that we had previously engaged with or wanted to keep tabs on, especially as your company is evolving and your needs are changing, or you're going from steady growth to hyper growth. You want to make sure that you're keeping tabs on all of those really high caliber, for us at least, engineers, to make sure that we can add, some awesome folks to tackle the tough challenges that we were faced with.
Okay, got it. Thanks. You're talking about changing times and things changing. Do you feel like it's taking longer to make hires for you today, and do you have to rely more on nurturing to meet some of these hiring goals of yours?
I would definitely say yes. The timeline has most definitely been prolonged for our teams for a multitude of reasons. We had shifts with specific customers on our roadmap, and had some various changes in our hiring needs. And candidates are seemingly more risk averse, or they're looking at the space in a very different lens, from early stage startups to late organizations. It seems like there's this pretty severe polarization. So we have been planning more nurturing, because as we start to look at the next year, specifically for us, we are going to hire quite a bit on the engineering side of the house. And so we want to make sure that we're cultivating a lot of this talent. So when it's the right time, we're still able to speak to those individuals. We've definitely been trying new strategies, a lot of which I brought up today, but we have been finding a stronger interest, specifically with Sobos, because what we've done is remove the recruiter phone call for these really high caliber individuals, and they go straight to speak to a hiring manager or our SVP of engineering or one of our VPs, and they have a better experience, and there's just more engagement from those initial phone calls.
Oh wow, nice. I would imagine that talent brand kind of plays a part in this as well. Does your recruiting team make social media posts that you guys share out? Do you have marketing do that? How do you guys think about talent brand?
Yeah, I mean, we view it as a collaborative posting culture. There are folks from various different functions across the org that not only post about recent news or exciting new technology that we're working on, use cases, as well as like hiring needs. It's definitely something that we view as a team sport versus an individual sport. Talent does do some of this, but in most cases, when we are looking to kind of create that wider net, it's more around the lines of the network sourcing that I mentioned. So we'll usually get together the immediate interview panel or adjacent members of the team and get them to post on their social media or share why they love their job, and then hashtag saying, hashtag hiring engineers, or, whatever it may be, to make sure that we're casting a wider and wider net.
Awesome. I know I've seen some companies out there post about some of their perks and benefits. Does that come up a lot? And for you guys, what are some of the high value, high priority perks and benefits that you hear from candidates today?
Definitely comes up a lot. I think one of my biggest things is I was never really a work from home person. There would be some days where I'd be like sitting on the couch, or like, oh, this is great, but I don't really have a desk or somewhere to work or anything that's ergonomical. So we went through a series of conversations with our executive teams and ended up getting a $500 work from home stipend, which candidates absolutely love. We also improved a lot of our wellness benefits to make sure that there was support from a mental wellness standpoint. So we have various different tools that we use and accounts that you can set up if that would be helpful. The other pieces, I think, are being really flexible with parents. We have a lot of new parents in Mapbox and in the organization, and we want to make sure that we're flexible with work hours, because things come up and sometimes things are really unexpected. So being able to put repetitive blocks on your calendar or being able to drop off last minute to address what that may be is just really important for that work-life balance. And so all of those things are what we bring up, aside from some of the old benefits that we still have, which is around donation matching for really valued causes, and a variety of other things. But I think those are the ones that have come up the most.
That's really cool. Yeah, I think those are some ones I hear commonly as well, and some of the things I'm very grateful for here at GEM as well. But that's all the time we have today. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. I think those are some awesome tips that you shared with us. So thank you for that. And to the audience, thank you again for joining us here at GEM Summit and checking out this presentation. We'll see you guys back at the general session. Yeah, have a great afternoon.
Thanks for having me.